You say that Labour's plans for nursery places is actually a sticking plaster to a more wider problem. But what do you mean by that?
Well, both major parties are engaged in what I've called an arms race now on childcare, which is this competition to provide more and more free childcare places to parents. Obviously, people think it's a vote winner, and it may well be. But the problem that both parties are trying to address is the cost of living for families, which is a very real problem. And we now have the situation, which wasn't so much the case a generation ago, where it's almost impossible for most families to survive on one income. And that means that when children are small, so under 3 or before school, it's almost impossible now for many families to choose for one partner to not work or to work part-time and provide some of that care themselves. They have to go back to work. Now, there are several problems with that. First of all, it's not what people want. The polling consistently shows that most parents would prefer to look after their children more themselves in those early years. Remember, those early years are very, very short. But also, it is just a sticking plaster because it is not solving the cost of living problems, which are not to do with childcare and are to do with tax and housing and many other things.
The CSJ did a bit of reporting into this, didn't they, Miriam? A bit of research, and it showed that 78% of parents with children under 5, as you were just saying, would like to spend more time with their children if they can't afford to. And a really shocking, striking, maybe not shocking, but striking 81% said that they felt it was more important for a government to help parents to stay at home for longer with a new baby rather than facilitating a rapid return to work. It is very commonsensical, and we're all parents. You have 2 little ones, Ben. My 3 are teenagers, and Miriam, you have 3 as well. We've all grappled with this. It's so controversial, though. How has it become so controversial to say it'd be quite nice if one of the parents had a bit more time at home with their baby?
Well, that is a really good question. And obviously this tweet got 2.5 million views, and it wasn't because people were supportive, shall we say. It was because it was controversial. And I think the heart of the matter is that it is very difficult now to say that it is a good thing for parents, maybe mothers in particular, to spend a lot of time with their infants. Now, remember, we're talking about under 2s here, so small babies. Of course, it's different when children get to 3 or 4. Of course, it's developmentally good for them to spend some time away from parents and get ready for school. Nobody's arguing that. You know, there's a reason why the 15-hour offer for 3 and 4-year-olds has such great take-up. It's a good idea. But it's very different for under 2s. And if you look at the research about what's good for children under 2, it doesn't seem clear that long hours in institutional childcare is good for babies. In fact, it's probably bad for babies. But it's very controversial to say that in an environment where so many families just have no choice. They might not want to put their baby in nursery, but they just have no choice. And so this is the angle that we need to tackle. How do we give parents that choice? Because we know it's best for babies and we know it's what parents want. But I think some, particularly on the left and particularly on Twitter, have this idea that it doesn't matter who looks after a baby and all adults should be able to go out to work if they want. Now, of course, they should be able to go out to work if they want, but that's not what all adults want. And we should be interested in addressing the reality and not some thought experiment about what's best for families.
And Miriam, actually, it's funny because the most vocal people on this issue, and some, who have been trolling you in recent days, in actual fact, I tend to find that the majority of them don't have kids at all. So they'd never get it and they'd never understand that important early years connection between infant and mother or infant and father. They just don't get it because they've not got kids. It's quite as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been following the trolls too closely, but there is something in that. And I think, until you have a child, you can't imagine the bond that you feel. And it is an instant bond that most people feel once that child is born, particularly for women, obviously, because of the hormonal aspect, the fact that you physically carry this child. And you do feel incredibly protective of this child. You don't want to leave it for a long period of time. So there are really good biological reasons for that. It's absolutely key to a baby's survival that it has that kind of protection.
Sure.
But there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing unfeminist about that. It's just biology.
Miriam, you're in a bit of trouble at the moment. The Parliamentary Standards Committee are investigating you, and I'm just going to stick my neck out and say it's because they don't really like strong-minded, opinionated women who are swimming against the tide of current public opinion within their party. Is that what's going on here?
I'm not allowed to speak about this at all under the conditions, I'm afraid.
OK, well, I've said it for you. I've said what I think is going on, then I'll just say it for you. And then one last question. When are we going to have an election, Miriam Cates?
Well, I think it has to be this year, doesn't it? There seem to be bets on May and bets on October, November, but I honestly don't know. I don't have the inside track on that, I'm afraid.
OK, well, look, good to see you, as always. Happy New Year to you. Keep up your great work. I think you're fighting all the right fights for all the right people. So we really appreciate you meeting us this morning on New Year's Day.